Hello and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 40, Wednesday, May 6th, 2020.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Emily.
Hey, Courtney, it is so great to be on the podcast again. And as much as I really love talking to a lot of authors, it's going to be a different kind of show today.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to have some guest readers on as part of our podcast party in April. But today we're pleased to formally introduce the concept of a guest reader. Our episodes this year, as you noted, have featured plenty of author interviews, which we are certainly grateful for. And, you might be a recent new listener because of some of those interviews. And you may not know that this show started more as an informal discussion between just the two of us. But today, we're adding more voices to the conversation as visiting participants, and we couldn't think of a more perfect fit than Brett Nachman of Notably Disney. Brett was kind enough to host us on his show, discuss Don Hahn's Yesterday's Tomorrow, back on his 9th episode last year. Notably Disney discusses not only Disney literature, but music as well, whether in the form of Disney's films, Broadway shows, or even theme park attractions. So we're excited to hear his perspective on the latter, featured in Kevin Rafferty's Magic Journey, My Fantastical Walt Disney Imagineering Career. Welcome, Brett.
Hey, Courtney and Emily. It's so good to be joining you all for this conversation. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. You've done plenty of author interviews, so you get to be on the other side of the introduction this time.
Hey, it's different and a treat, so I'm excited.
Yeah, your most recent author interview with Alton Fitzgerald White about his book, his My Pride, about his role in The Lion King, was excellent. I just finished that this week.
Oh, thanks. It was such an honor to talk with Alton, and he's had such a storied and legendary career, and now he's added author to his list of different accomplishments. And it was an absolute blast. I love talking with really fascinating people, and he certainly fits the bill.
Well, he was the perfect fit for you since it's a combination of both writing and music. I don't know if you want to give just a little more details about your show before we jump into our discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. Yeah, essentially, Notably Disney started just early 2019 and usually produce a couple of episodes a month. And the focus is on really honoring both Disney music and books. One thing that I think all three of us have in common is we appreciate the written word. And I kind of extend that with Notably Disney by not only talking about books, but also the tunes and the scores that really define all aspects of the Walt Disney Company. So you mentioned some of the different platforms earlier, from Broadway shows and the theme parks to film and television and so many different mediums. And of course, the world of Disney Disney books encompass all of these different avenues as well. So every episode entails a conversation, whether it be about a specific topic or property or product. Other times maybe a distillation, and kind of covering a wide breadth of stuff. So everything from, it was such a blast having you both on to talk about Don Hahn's book, and we've had a few iterations of tunes and quotes Disney trivia, but also interviews with authors like Alton Fitzgerald White, Jim Fanning. The list goes on, and even some songwriters and a composer like Jeff Kricka, who composed the score for the Imagineering story documentary on Disney Plus. So it's always a really thoughtful and interesting dialogue with whoever comes on the show. Occasionally I'll have some shows where I just mention things like I highlighted a bunch of books from 2019. So really just trying to appeal to folks who love Disney like us, and really honoring the focus of books and music, and sometimes the blend between the two. So that's always a blast.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun keeping up with your podcast. And, this has been one of those opportunities where Podcast Universe has really brought us all together and has helped us meet people from around the country that share similar interests. So it's really cool that we've been on your show and now you've been in our show. And this, I know, is going to continue back and forth, and it's going to be awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel honored to be in the same space as both of you who conduct great interviews and conversations as well. So I think collectively we're carving out a unique space in the Disney podcast universe.
Well, and we all have great taste, because I believe today's book we each got for Christmas, maybe, or around that time when we were comparing, hey, what did you get for Christmas? What can we all talk about? We all had this one.
Yeah, I actually got a little bit earlier. So
Okay.
At the D23 Expo, I picked up Rafferty's book, but I enjoyed it for a second time recently, and looking forward to chatting about it.
Perfect. Well, as you noted, Kevin Rafferty's book, Magic Journey, My Fantastical Walt Disney Imagineering Career. It's our topic today, and I'd love to know both of your first impressions of the book, overall thoughts, whether on the text itself, the cover, both covers. I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah, so for me, I want to talk about the covers because I just absolutely love covers. I'm going to note, I am terrible at remembering every Imagineer and like what they did, as well as like animators. Like, you can throw all these animator names out there. I'm like, yeah, I can name you numerous animators or Imagineers, but I like never remember what they do. And what I love about this cover is that Courtney, I'll let you talk about the dust jacket with the statue, since you work for the Walt Disney Company. You can tell us why that's important. But I took off the dust jacket because I don't like reading with dust jackets on. And boom, there he is with this beautiful cover art that is under the dust jacket that tells you pretty much all of the attractions he worked on. And I love that right away you're drawn into this book, that you're like, oh my gosh, I love Tower of Terror and PhilharMagic. And what? Mickey's Runaway Railway? That's not even open yet at the time when this book was published. And then you flip to the back and you see a little alien creature that you're like, I don't know who that is, but I'm intrigued. And cars. And so you're just immediately drawn in, that even if you're like, who the heck is Kevin Rafferty? You can see like the front cover underneath the dust jacket is like his resume of all the things that he's done. And that's really cool to me. And that hooked me right away, that I was really excited to open the book and start reading.
Yeah, I like the one under the dust jacket better than the dust jacket itself, but I'll take that moment to explain. As you said, I work for the Disney Company. For new listeners, I always got to put all views are my own and do not reflect those of the Walt Disney Company. But on this cover is a Donald Duck statue, and it says, presented to Kevin P. Rafferty, recognizing 40 magical years with the Walt Disney Company. So heritage is really important to the Walt Disney Company, and they like to celebrate when people reach milestones. So once you've been with the company for a year, you get a little pin with Steamboat Willie, and that goes on your name tag, because even if you're not working in the parks or on stage, as the company refers to it, you still wear your name tag. I recently received a 5-year pin last year, and that had Pluto on it. I believe at 10 years you get a plaque, and then every 5 years after that you get a statue. So Donald Duck is the Imagineering statue with him on a reel of film. Pretty fun. I know at 15 here at Walt Disney World, it is the Walt Disney World Castle. And at Disneyland, it's the Disneyland Castle. So it differs a little bit by segments. So I get, it covers the 40 years, kind of gives him that credibility to the cover. But once I took the dust jacket off, I was like, wow, this cute little collage definitely draws you in more. So I'm curious why they did that. Do you have any thoughts, Brett?
I don't know. I seem to recall when the book was still available for pre-order, I think maybe the cover art was a little bit different, or maybe it just focused on the dust cover. But I think it kind of adds to offering a bit of a surprise for readers once you uncover it. And I'm not sure about what both of you think. I love the creativity of the main cover with Rafferty's cartoon image, because it shows him in his truest form, typing away different ideas, and all the different characters and properties that he's come up with, as you both illustrated, appear magically from the paper. And you can even see some of the cars from Radiator Springs Racers and the Test Track car, and obviously responsible for both of those projects, just zipping down the pieces of paper. I think it's just super creative and a way of leveraging all of that he's created for the company over the past several decades.
I also just noticed as we're staring at it, he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt, which I feel like has been pretty popular in the Mickeys of Glendale, like the Imagineering line that's often sold at those D23 expos. They did a Hawaiian shirt that was parts the Caribbean inspired, Haunted Mansion inspired, but his Hawaiian shirt matches the images on the cover. So it's, you know, a similar style to those, but it's Tough to Be a Bug, Enchanted Tiki Room, kind of a little further, deeper reiteration of that pattern that we see throughout the book as well.
Yeah, and I like the pattern that they put together, that it does, so like the cover is like a bigger blown up, you see each attraction once, but I like the smaller pattern that they make out of it for his shirt, and then it goes throughout, and it actually makes the book look really cool when you close it. It almost looks like a tie-dye pattern across the pages. I don't know. This book to me just screams Imagineer. When I look at a lot of the Disney books I have on my shelf, they're super colorful and they're just non-conventional. So I love that the book physically itself is very Imagineering and fantastical, as the title describes.
You mentioned those pages. Let's kind of jump into that. The feel of those. It's almost like a magazine feel.
Yeah, they went for the high quality paper here. The book's a little heavy. Like for a standard size book, when you pick it up, there's some weight to it because of those pages. But it didn't bother me about that, and I liked the glossy pages. It was a very different reading experience that way. It felt more, I don't know, like bright, I guess, because that it really brings across the color of the pictures. It's very bright. I don't know. I liked it a lot.
I would add, too, I noted, too, that this is a very hefty book in terms of the weight. But what's really interesting, too, and I'm not sure if I would have expected this until I first picked it up, the font size is pretty small, too. So you're getting a lot of content on each of these pages, and it's a 300-page book. This is a book that you're going to want to read every word, because there's a lot on every page.
Emily and I noted that texting back and forth when we were reading it, because we had a very similar discussion, but on the opposite end. On our first episode, we covered Marty Sklar's Dream It, Do It, which is also about 300 pages, but the font is pretty large. So we're like, oh, this is kind of a contrast. Like, the font is so small. But like you said, I hung on to every word of it.
Yeah, so in a way, I'm going to jump off that. I'm talking about how we feel about Kevin Rafferty, his characterization, because I couldn't put this down. I would read 2 or 3 stories at a time and not realize that I just read 45 pages in the last hour or so. So what did you guys think about Kevin Rafferty? Like, if you had never met him and knew nothing about him, this is your first time reading it, how would you describe him?
I actually have met him.
Lucky.
At D20, I'm not sure if it was the first or second D23 Expo, but it was in the Imagineering Pavilion when he was showcasing the not early model, but eventually the prototype, more or less, for Radiator Springs Racers. And I didn't know who he was at the time, but he was situated in front of the exhibit and talking about his baby, and you could tell that enthusiasm was just absolutely innate, and it was palpable. You could tell, and I'm sure all of us can sense that in how he writes, and that he's just extremely genuine and enthusiastic. But I remember at the time actually just remembering, wow, this is a really nice guy. He was very personable. Probably talked with him for a good 5 minutes or so, and since then I've seen him present different things at the various D23 expos. So I guess I can speak about from that lens of that. I think the person you see on paper in terms of what he describes and how he comes off in real life is completely similar and authentic.
That's so good to know. I think my first recollection of him would be the 2017 D23 Expo. I have not attended in person, but there was a live stream of the panel, and I remember him coming out to speak about Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and it was exciting to see how passionate he was about that project, and I think that really comes through in his memoir. But I'm curious, Emily, since you had said you weren't as aware, you really were introduced to him here within this book, so what did you think there?
He made me cry in the first, is it in his foreword where he talks about watching, it's in his foreword or it's in his introduction, somewhere in the first, 2 chapters, he talks about why he's an Imagineer, and he talks about seeing this woman and her granddaughter going down the street, but it's the grandmother in her scooter with the mini ears and a balloon and ice cream, who's over the moon crazy, having a blast and saying this is the best day ever. And the man made me cry in the first 10 pages. And I was just we're going to get along fine, because our sentiment for Disney, having worked there as a cast member and entertainment and having those diverse interactions with guests of all ages, I was this is why I love Disney and why I loved working for Disney. And I was oh, he gets it. We're on the same way. I think I'm going to understand a lot of his passion right away. So I loved that he opened with that story. And he's just so fun. He really does have we're going to talk about some of these funny stories and interesting experiences he's had. He has had quite a non-conventional career. But he was just a lot of fun. And I love his playfulness. I think he is that. There's a child, like Walt says, there's a child in all of us. He is that personified across the pages. So I really enjoyed reading from him. I felt like he was a very trusted storyteller, because he's very, like you said, authentic in his voice. And he can capture emotion from laughing to that heartfelt, for me, crying moment. So I really enjoyed him as a reader, as an author, for me as a reader. So I'm jealous that, Brett, you've met him in person, because now I really want to meet him. I feel after every book, now he's my favorite Imagineer. I'm sure if we read another book, I'll be oh, this person's my favorite Imagineer. But right now I'm Kevin Rafferty is amazing and I love him and I don't ever want him to leave this company. Why are you not making more stuff? So yeah, I loved it. It was a great read. He can, like I said, he can really tell a story. There's a reason he became a show writer, which is, it really came through in his writing of a book as well.
You can almost tell in reading through this that it's he was laughing to himself as he was crafting this, because you see the puns and the playing on words throughout, which is just so illustrative of who he is as a person. But I could imagine him sitting on his computer and typing out some of these just funny interpretations of experiences, and that he's just laughing to himself and finding this to be ridiculously entertaining for himself, but also realizing, hey, I think a lot of Disney fans are going to appreciate this insider perspective.
There was so much personality that came through in his writing, so I completely agree that you can tell why he's a show writer. I do want to bounce off of Emily having noted that we've read a few different Imagineering biographies or autobiographies. And one nice connection, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, was that Marty Sklar is clearly a pillar in Kevin Rafferty's career, and Emily and I have read Dream It, Do It on the first episode of the podcast. So I'd love to know what's something new you learned about Marty, or something that was affirmed about him when you were reading Kevin's memoir.
Essentially, what I really appreciated in getting new insight into Marty Sklar was seeing his just playfulness and kindness with Kevin, with another more junior Imagineer, through the notes that they would exchange. I thought that was really touching, and obviously scattered throughout the book are images of these notes that Kevin incorporates. It kind of felt like reading through this, and made me think of the Remembering Roy E. Disney book, which was like a photo journal of sorts. That's by Dave Bosser. And this is kind of the same thing in terms of we see the little mementos and pieces of writing that Kevin has crafted over the years. So I love that. And then I really also valued seeing how Kevin Rafferty put on a bit of a show for the Marty Sklar gala that was a number of years ago. And he recalls some of those events and how that was very much celebratory, and he performed. So I think just seeing that almost like a father-son type dynamic between the two was just extremely touching. And certainly that also extended to him, Kevin, being asked to give remarks at Marty's funeral. So it was really emotional.
I really loved that Marty was used throughout this book, and I kind of saw a connection here because we have read so many other books, including Marty's memoir, that I think Marty really took on the role of Walt. I think from a lot of things, we read Raleigh Crump's book. It's kind of a cute story. Reading Marty's book, that Walt was the man who they called him like the ultimate casting director. He could find people's roles. He knew how to motivate people, inspire them in different ways they didn't know that they had talent. And Kevin did not get to meet or work with Walt, but Marty pretty much takes on that role for Kevin, helping him push into different parts of Imagineering, traveling around the world, trying out different things. So, and also, having that unique relationship that Marty, I felt, was kind of like Walt, where everyone had their own way of interacting with Walt, that I felt like in this book, we really got to see Marty in that role as the father figure of the company, that he knew how to push and pull different things to make them work and how to motivate different creative minds. So I really saw a comparison, at least to me, of Marty is the new Walt, per se. At least that's what I got from Kevin's perspective. And I also thought it was really cool to see him get the praise that he deserves, because in Dream It, Do It, I feel like Kevin also, they're very modest about their accomplishments, always attributing also to all the team and all the other people they've worked with. So it was nice, I think, to see Marty get the praise, because in his own book, he's more modest about himself.
Emily, and all jest, you stole my insight, but I have a little more to add. No, it's okay.
I'm sorry.
You're fine. I am teasing you out of love. I think, we both read Rolly Crump's book, so it's easy to see, just a few weeks ago, the parallels there. For me, similar, wanting to go off that note, you see a boss relationship, because often, we hear about Walt more in the removed third party, maybe the Bob Thomas biography is like Walt the myth. But when we read Rolly's book, you get more of Walt as a boss, Walt's quirks, things that he didn't like, things that he did like as a leader that humanized him. And I kind of get the sense, like Marty kind of became the face of Imagineering and, like up to that level. So to hear more from Kevin, who worked directly beneath him, or got in trouble for stepping on the papers in the office and having the moment of like facing Marty, like, oh, there he is, the big boss. It humanized him and added another dimension to it for me that I really enjoyed reading about.
So let's talk about attractions. As we know, in reading through Kevin's book, he gives a lot of attention to really each of the properties that he's been involved in over his many-decade career, and offers a lot of fun stories associated with them. So maybe everyone can pick a Kevin Rafferty attraction, or one that's that he was heavily involved in, and maybe just exchange some thoughts on those attractions.
I was torn between talking about two. I was thinking of talking about Tower of Terror, but I think that attraction already gets so much praise just in merch and media, just because it is so much fun and awesome and an Imagineering icon. But I want to talk about It's Tough to Be a Bug. I don't think that attraction gets as much praise, other than everyone knows the Hopper animatronic is really cool. But I think it's one that, because it's under a tree, you kind of have to search for it a little bit more. So I really liked reading about this attraction. I connected with Kevin Rafferty on this because he just goes, ugh, I hate bugs. And I'm like, yep, me too. I thought it was interesting how he was like, this is definitely going to be the Lion King. Rafiki, going to be great. We're going to feature this well-loved Disney classic. And then Michael Eisner's like, what about bugs? And he's like, are you kidding me? So I loved that transition. But then I also loved how he got to start working with Pixar. And that transition that this attraction has for Kevin of opening up his eyes. Like, I don't think if he worked on It's Tough to Be a Bug that we wouldn't get the relationship he had to then create Carsland. If he had to wait all that time to work with Pixar using their characters and their stories, I don't think Carsland would be as awesome as it was if he didn't have that early experience of doing It's Tough to Be a Bug. Ended up being so fun. And I liked his stories of watching the audience freak out, because I do that too. Because now that I know where all the different effects happen, there are some that I choose not to partake in. So I either lean forward a little bit or don't look up when certain things drop from the ceiling. But it's kind of fun to watch the other audience's reaction for people who haven't done it before. And I thought it was so funny when he said a woman who was experiencing it for the first time thought he was getting handsy with her when the bugs run under you, and she started whacking him with her purse until she realized that like everyone's experiencing this. And I just laughed a lot reading about this attraction and what he went through to create it. And I thought it was really cool.
For me, I'm going with the deeper cut here, but this is one that I absolutely love. Not even an attraction, but I love Sonny Eclipse. And I guess as a kid, chicken nuggets, they're easy to come by. Cosmic Rays, most popular place at Magic Kingdom. Eating at Cosmic Rays was a must-do for my family on our trips to Magic Kingdom annually when I was a kid. And I always had to sit in that seating area that's like right in front of the Sonny Eclipse animatronic. And I absolutely love him. On my boyfriend's first trip to Disney, I was like, you gotta come see this thing, Sonny Eclipse. We get a little kind of background leading to that in Tokyo Disney's Pan-Galactic Pizza Port and the creation of Tony Solaroni. Kevin goes more in depth to that, and I have not been to Tokyo Disney. It is absolutely on my bucket list. But I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a cousin of Sonny Eclipse, and I have to tell you, it's going to be high on my priority list once I make it to Tokyo Disney to go see Tony Solaroni. So I enjoyed that story. And then eventually he does touch on Sonny Eclipse. And I kind of just, for me, I feel like he said he came through the new Tomorrowland in 1994 and being a child of the 90s. That is what I remember of Tomorrowland. So I've always kind of wondered, like, when did Sonny Eclipse show up? What's his backstory? And Kevin was kind enough to detail some of that for us. So much deeper cut, but truly enjoyed learning it. What about you, Brett?
Oh, I just love all those picks. I think those are fantastic. And I just want to briefly mention, if listeners want to check out, there's a video on YouTube from D23 Expo 2013. Kevin was part of a panel called Leave 'Em Laughing, and it's all about humor in the parks, and he relays some of the stories from creating some of these attractions, including the original script for It's Tough to Be a Bug regarding that whole mating game segment. And so I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, thank you.
And Sonny Eclipse, obviously awesome. So I was trying to think of what attraction I want to highlight, and I recognize it's not the most beloved iteration of a classic Disney attraction, but I always enjoyed when it was running the Enchanted Tiki Room under new management, which was basically when Iago and Zazu take over the establishment. And it only gets a few pages of attention in the book, but I just want to mention a few things that I really appreciated. One, he has the whole lyrics for the rendition of Friend Like Me, but spinning it up to be where Iago is now the singer, and he actually got Alan Menken's permission to spin up the lyrics, which I thought was only appropriate, but also just very sweet. And there's some funny stories woven in throughout here. Like he talks about how he took Gilbert Gottfried, the voice of Iago, to Disneyland. That was kind of amusing. And the whole part about how he was, because Kevin is just a natural performer and entertainer in his own right. Like, he was performing the Oa song, I think, the Messin' with a song, and he was doing, as we read in it, he was performing it just, I guess, to a few other people in the Disney building, and apparently it was like in an open venue, and the Disney board of directors were downstairs, and they heard the whole thing. And at the time, legendary actor Sidney Poitier was part of the board, and he just started clapping, and it kind of caused this whole like appreciation for Kevin's rendition of his song for the Tiki Room. So yeah, Tiki Room under new management was definitely heavily criticized for various reasons. I always enjoyed it, and maybe that was just because I was growing up, but I thought it was hilarious and witty. And ultimately, as we learned from Kevin, he said that a little Iago goes a long way. And I should have realized sidekicks are sidekick for a reason. So not everybody appreciates sidekicks when they are the main stars. That's what I took away from those few pages on Under New Management.
You know, Brett, I have to share that I've also always enjoyed Under New Management, because looking back or thinking back, that was my first experience with the Tiki Room. So I didn't know that any other version existed, except for someone saying like, oh, this is taken, from the original, but I didn't know what the original was. I had no context. So for me, I've always enjoyed Under New Management. So usually when people are like, oh, and they want to like spew about it, I just kind of like not talk about it, because I always kind of enjoyed it. I liked Zazu because, kids in the 90s, those were the sidekicks we grew up watching. But like now experiencing Tiki Room, I'm like, oh, I get it. But I have to say, I was in the same boat where I thought it was fun.
All views are my own and do not represent the Walt Disney Company.
Good time to bring that in, Courtney.
I saw the original as a kid, and then, as a kid, I liked Under New Management. I did find it fun, but then I can also understand some of the criticism now in my adulthood looking back. But
exactly.
I'm glad that Oa lives on in Trader Sam's, and it's so nice to just have little nuggets. I feel like Kevin Rafferty answered random questions that I have about things. Like, I always wondered why she doesn't move during the Oa piece of Trader Sam's. For those who might not be familiar, there was an animatronic that was in the Enchanted Tiki Room Under New Management. Very impressive, very fluid, probably one of the best parts of that show. She was salvaged for Trader Sam's when it opened as a small bar at the Polynesian Resort at Walt Disney World, and she's up in the rafter. And when you order a specific drink, like a storm starts happening, her eyes glow, and an audio from that show plays as a nice little Easter egg. But she doesn't move, and I was like, man, that's such a cool animatronic. But then we found out her parts were not salvageable in the fire that ultimately did this attraction in. Which, also, fun fact, I was at Walt Disney World that day, but I was not there when it happened. But I saw the show that morning, so I can say that I was one of the last people to see the Enchanted Tiki Room Under New Management. I remember
crazy.
being...
Aww.
Yeah, we were there for a winter break trip in January, and like my family would always start left and go to Adventureland first.
Always.
So I was there with friends from college, my roommate, another friend from high school, and so we did Tiki Room that morning as one of the first things. And then maybe like that afternoon, my dad had seen on the internet, he's like, Tiki Room caught on fire, and I was like, I was just there. So just got to see Iago give his last show. Unexpected
final experiences, right?
The Tiki gods have spoken.
They did.
The last time I was at Trader Sam's, I got her drink. I do forget the name of it off the top of my head. I have the bowl. It's on my hers comes in like a bowl. It's just
called a Oa.
Was that?
The drink is just called a Oa.
Okay. I thought it had a longer, fancier name.
Nope.
So I got her drink, and it comes in a bowl, and they light it on fire, and you throw cinnamon into it to make little sparks, and it's like you're having like a ritual to praise her, and everyone in the bar's just chanting and it's so much fun. I highly suggest Trader Sam's. Such a great
Have
bar.
you been, Brett?
I haven't, but it sounds like such a spectacle. I'm excited.
It really is. It's so immersive.
It is worth putting your name on the wait list. If they're like, oh, we don't have space right now, put your name on the list. Go enjoy some food at Captain Cook's.
They'll text you when it's ready.
Exactly. It's worth waiting. It is worth waiting to go.
That's awesome that Owa's legacy lives on.
But some didn't quite get the legacy to live on. For as much as we learned about the in-depth stories of the creation of some of our favorite attractions, Kevin shares plenty of attractions that were in development but ultimately shelved. So I'd love to know which of those stuck out to you guys.
I'm going to say, Courtney, thank you for letting me talk about Roger Rabbit, because you know how much I love him. So I want to talk about Cartoon Studios and Roger Rabbit. So we did get a version of this in California and Disneyland. Not Cartoon Studios, but they have Mickey's Toontown, and Roger Rabbit got a place in there. And the only surviving attraction from this original plan is Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin, which is on my top 5 things I want to do. I love Roger Rabbit. I want to get to Disneyland to meet him. But I really, really would have loved to see Kevin's original plan for Cartoon Studios come to play, because it would have been off of Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood Studios, at the time, MGM Studios. And it would have been like the toon version of Hollywood, which would have fit so well with how Toontown works in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like that transition from real Hollywood to Toontown would have been seamless from the film. And they had so many great attractions planned. The Baby Herman's Runaway Baby Buggy, which I feel like the name just lent itself to Runaway Railway coming down the line. And then also Gus Bus, was it Toontown Transit, would have been like you were following a bus who is friends with Benny from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, who wanted to be a star, and you're on his bus route, and it turns out he has an audition for a movie. So then you like are zipping through Hollywood with him, and all these crazy things are happening. And I love the effect that he talked about, where you would kind of run over Roger Rabbit, or he would like get in the way, but then he falls on top of the bus, and you were supposed to see in your attraction vehicle an imprint of him come through, while he's also hanging on the screen across from you. Like it would kind of be, I think, like the submarines, where you kind of have a lot of all this stuff happening 360 around you with screens incorporated with like real sets and stuff. But it's a shame none of it really came to fruition, just because the technology wasn't quite there yet. The money that would have been involved for such sophisticated ride options, and also they were like, the blueprint we need to do this is a lot bigger than what we have. So unfortunately it didn't come to play, but I just think the placement of Hollywood Studios and how they could have incorporated those elements from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it just would have been so seamless and so cool.
Yeah, I echo your disappointment there, Emily, and how it never came to fruition. And I think part of that, might also stem from the whole issue of rights and ownership over
right. That was very interesting to read about as well. That's right. That was a big piece of it. I forgot about that. That was very interesting, of how we haven't seen more Roger come into the parks, just because of how many different studios were involved in that movie, that it just created kind of a hassle.
Yeah. No, and it makes me think of how that whole chapter, really, where it focuses on the early days of Disney MGM Studios, and how much of the focus was on it being an actual working studio, and guests having the experience of playing a role, whether it be in some of the shows or the studio tour. But ultimately, it needed more attractions, and that's why Kevin and others developed all these really cool concepts. So I'm bummed that Cartoon Studios did not materialize.
Well, you had another one right across the street, allegedly, or down Sunset Boulevard for yours, Brett. Do you want to share what jumped out to you?
Yeah, well, and I love all of our picks for this. And I think what you really conveyed nicely there, Emily, in kind of conveying the plot is that's what Kevin accomplishes in this book. He really sets up the scene, and as if you can totally visualize what these attractions would have resembled. So I feel like we're kind of getting that in a different context through reading this, and I got that same sentiment when I was reading through his description of a show, and ultimately because it was a show, that was kind of what allowed it to get the unfortunate axe, because the studios didn't need more shows, but it was called the Creatures Choice Awards show, which essentially is, as he described it, it was kind of akin to like the American Adventure at Epcot. It would have involved a ton of audio animatronics, but in this case, it would have been a tribute to old school Hollywood monsters and like an Oscars ceremony, but featuring these monsters. And Kevin sets it up absolutely beautifully by talking about some of the musicians that would have been part of this act, and it would have been hosted by an audio animatronic Eddie Murphy, otherwise known as Eddie Franken-Murphy. And apparently they locked him into serving in that capacity. There would have been an Elvira AA, which I think would have been very weird considering how the actress who performs her is very seductive and sultry. So I think that would have made it more of like a PG type attraction. But I thought that was just totally illustrative of the era. But my gosh, it was just such a really cool concept of having these different creatures fly into the theater or appear out of nowhere to accept their awards. We see a concept art of Godzilla walking toward the spaceship Earth to accept his. It was really clever, but ultimately it would have been extremely cost prohibitive. And I think the AAs would have been a big part of that in terms of the amount of animatronics. It was a really lofty concept, and it actually, in reading it, seems like something that could have worked out really well at Universal, considering that they've really leveraged their classic monsters over the years. But I'm disappointed that this didn't materialize, because I think it would have ultimately showed Disney's ability to focus on not only their own IP, but also those that encompassed the history of Hollywood and movie making.
Yeah, that one blew my mind because I had never heard anything about concept for the Creature Choice Awards, and it seemed like it was very far along in development, where he shares they brought Eddie Murphy in, showed him different things. I recall in college, my roommate and I were super cool, and for fun, we would watch Disney documentaries that people had uploaded to YouTube. It just brought us a lot of happiness. And I remember one of the ones we watched was Walt Disney World Past, Present, and Future, and it's hosted by John Lithgow. And I want to say it's celebrating the 20th anniversary of Walt Disney World, so 1991, early 90s, our timeline. I was watching, and at the end, the future part, as it alludes to, is like, here's what's coming soon. And my roommate and I, our minds were blown because several of the things mentioned never came to light. Like, they talk about the Russian and Spain pavilion for Epcot. Like, this is on I'm assuming aired on ABC or NBC or a televised event. And they show the concept art for Dick Tracy's Crime Stoppers, which Kevin details the history of as well, and the Roger Rabbit attraction. So I had heard of those. I was like, oh, interesting. But this Creature Choice Awards came out of nowhere for me, so that was really captivating to read about.
Yeah, it seems like that was the Disney decade that never was.
Yeah. My other pick, though, for as I was reading, since you guys picked two really good ones, this kind of came to fruition, but for me, it was interesting to see how far along something development was before it sort of pivoted. And that was one of the later chapters, which was about Carsland, but without the film Cars. So Kevin talks about recognizing that they needed to breathe a little more life into Disney's California Adventure. The park was struggling a bit, so he had the idea for a Cars Land, which would be drawing on the California car culture. Perfect for him because he's a huge car aficionado, goes into some stories of his childhood and like his dad's car. and sets up like all that he was going to do for this Cars themed land. You're going to have something similar to what we have over at Walt Disney World, like the sci-fi dine-in type restaurant, a restaurant honoring Marty Sklar, different attractions, and like they get pretty far along, and it turns out Pixar is doing a film about cars. So the idea completely pivots to, it starts as incorporating cars into that Cars land just within what would become Radiator Springs Racers, but then just becomes Carsland. But it was so fascinating to me how similar some of the concept art was. Like Flo's restaurant, very similar design to like what they were planning for Marty's like malt shop type thing. So that was just really fun to see, like, okay, we didn't get this, but we kind of did, and was just a fun story for me.
So I really enjoyed that Cars chapter, Carsland. I think it is the longest chapter in the book, and it comes towards the end. It's in that last third. But what's really cool about reading that is you almost saw all of the lessons he learned as an Imagineer in that chapter, because he finally gets to develop his own land. And that's like what he describes as the ultimate goal of an Imagineer, is to be in charge of not just a small piece of something, but like the overall big picture. And it was really cool to see that he went through everything from having to decide what it's going to be through the initial planning stages, and then all the changes that come in between. So I felt like a lot of his experiences from prior attractions that you read about, you see all of it kind of come together in the formulation of Carsland, which was very working with other studios, with Pixar. All of that, I think, kind of came together in that chapter.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what's nice, too, is that you see that Kevin really wanted to extend the legacy of some different older or extinct Disney attractions into this land. Like the Road Trip USA kind of seems like a world of motion of sorts, whereas other parts of the attraction would have been like the Nature's Wonderland. And yeah, I like what you're saying there. Like it's almost like a culmination of his life's work, and ultimately a lot of the really cool concepts that have defined Disney. Right, so we would have gotten like a duplicate of the sci-fi drive-in, but that didn't happen. So it goes.
I really love that he was able to include so much concept art, though. Like that was fun for me. We kind of talked about the pages being of magazine texture, and I think that allowed us to get some great full-color photos, not just of those concept art, but Kevin's life in general, and fun little nuggets there.
Yeah, it was cute seeing him in his little car as a kid. And you see his fascination with cars also throughout the book, when he was working on Test Track and working on that attraction, going out to drive in some of these really fantastic cars, but also then doing the obstacle course, or kind of like an obstacle course, all the testing. You see that throughout, and then it does come together really nicely in the Cars chapter, where you're like, oh yeah, he does really love cars. And you can tell he really is passionate about cars throughout the book, except for maybe his first car that he drove to his
interview.
His interview where it rained on him
through the car.
That was a disaster. That was a disaster for sure.
So that was one good story. He had lots of funny stories, like that car when driving to his interview for Imagineering, and then it turns out they're like, he thinks he's going to create attractions, and they're like, we need a file guy. So what are some of your favorite stories that you took? He has so many. Brett, like you said, how he writes these, you can just hear him laughing to himself retelling these stories. So what were some of your favorites? Courtney, do you want to start us off?
Sure, because I called dibs on a story. We were comparing notes, just to prepare and make sure we had our talking points. And for this question, I said I wanted dibs on the Rolling Stones story. This was so unexpected and out of left field, but I absolutely enjoyed it. He was talking about different travel that he's done for work, and he was heading to the East Coast and booked first class on a flight, and it turns out nobody else is in first class except for him and the Rolling Stones, and he ends up talking to them. I could think because they're kind of like, who's this guy? I think we're supposed to have this to ourselves, but I guess he got his ticket first. And he gets invited to go party with them, but says, sorry, I can't. I have to go do a presentation for Imagineering. And essentially one of the band members is like, Disney's lucky to have you. But like, what a wild moment. I believe even the paparazzi like catches him walking off the plane with them because he hit it off with the Stones, which is so fun. I really enjoyed that travel chapter. I think also in there he shares an encounter with a haunted hotel room, and these just weren't things that I'd expect to have in the memoir, but I absolutely enjoyed them because he's such a great storyteller.
I really like the Rolling Stone story because, like you said, it was so unexpected. But I loved how they thought his job was so cool. And Kevin's like, you're literally rock stars. My job is you're rock stars. And they're like, you design attractions for Disney. And they're like just as equally excited to have him along with the ride, along with them on their trip. And it would have been cool. I think his coworkers might have understood if I admire so much his dedication. But I think if he's like, or at least get their number, meet up with them after your meeting. Come on. We have phones in this day and age. Even when he told that story, there could have been ways to reconnect and be like, hey, after my meeting. That would have been cool to see if that play out.
It makes me wonder, do you both remember like roughly when that took place? Because I was thinking to myself, why weren't they enlisted for Rock and Roller Coaster?
Yeah, I don't know that the date is clear because I do feel like the chapters aren't fully in chronological order. I mean, to an extent, they lead up to it, but they are. Do you remember what attraction organized he was by traveling theme. For? I don't know that he says. He might, but it didn't jump out to me. Because, yeah, that's a good point, Brett. Though another funny rock star story is the one about his son who's learning the birds and the bees from Steven Tyler of Aerosmith at the time of Rock and Roller Coaster. And then secondhand story, his son, I think he's at an Aerosmith concert or like talking
his
to
friend
a big,
was.
Yeah, and he's like, I was this close to them. You'll never be that close. And then Kevin Rafferty Jr. takes out the picture of him with Steven Tyler. He's like, yeah, you're right. I was this close.
Yeah, that's one of those moments where it's like, maybe it's mean for me to rub this in someone's face, but I'm like, no, you got to do that when it comes to meeting that rock star. And his friend's like, haha, you won't get that close. And he's like, no, you won't get this close, where he knows me on a first name basis.
What about you, Brett?
Oh, there's so many fun stories. Like, that's, I think, all of what this book is about. Like, it's just, even though there's a cohesive narrative that follows his life, ultimately there are so many amusing anecdotes packed into every chapter. So I didn't really know what to focus on because there were so many good options. I ultimately wanted to mention with Finding Nemo Submarine Voyage, which is kind of cool because decades earlier, when the original attraction was still operating, Kevin was involved in a temporary makeover of sorts of the attraction during a Blast to the Past weekend, where they essentially had 50s and 60s themed like surf music that was incorporated into the attraction and the script. So he kind of had an opportunity to return to the subs when they decided to convert it into a Finding Nemo themed attraction. And it was so cool how Kevin takes his research seriously. So he watches all of these movies involving submarines and crews on these vessels. And so he says that he basically noted all the different phrases and commands that would be illustrated in these movies. And I'm just going to share a quote from the book here. He says, "In the final attraction script, I wrote this official sounding line the captain says just after the bubbly dive under the lagoon waterfall." So the phrase is, "Set course to 60 degrees true." And then essentially Kevin says a few weeks after, Bob Iger invited the admiral of the U.S. Navy, and basically he's corrected that, oh, I'm 1 degree off. So the phrase was not entirely accurate, and so he felt really embarrassed, and they actually ended up having the line re-recorded so it would, in fact, be true and correct. So I think it's perhaps not as elaborate or showy as the Rolling Stones story, which is excellent, but this kind of illustrates how, Kevin takes his work very seriously and wanted to really invest himself in these submarine films, and he can find the humor in his own in mistakes and little things that happen, and thankfully there was the opportunity to fix it. So I also just, like I said, I really love the story about the Blast to the Past weekend, or Blast to the Past period, I should say, and in retheming Submarine Voyage, because I would have never expected some references to Beach Boys and some of that type of music outside of the old score at California Adventure, but actually in Disneyland. So that's my story.
That was a really good one. And you're right. And that's a great example of a story where you see his humor come through, because after they correct that line is where he has like 4 sentences of just nautical puns to express how annoyed he was at the fact that it was wrong. But he's also like, but what could you expect me to do? I can't remember all the puns, but it was a really great way to wrap up that story, that you saw his creative writing really come out talking about that.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sorry, I was just going to say, and he also describes how he and fellow Imagineer Kathy Mangum just get along swimmingly. And it's like, oh, eye roll, but it's a perfect eye roll.
Yeah, he has a lot of those, quote, dag jokes is a lot of his puns, but they're so great. And it's kind of funny because his son, Kevin Rafferty Jr., did the introduction. And I feel like if he reading his dad's book, like you could just see him going like, really, Dad? Really? So a story I wanted to share is from the beginning of the book. The beginning of the book really, really reached me. So after he made me cry, he made me laugh, talking about his first job in Disneyland as a dishwasher. And he was it the Plaza Inn restaurant, I believe? Yes. And in the back, he noted that he got really handy at his job, that he was the dishwasher that, as a lot of people kept leaving, he would stay. So he got really good at knowing like the tricks of when a pipe wasn't working, like what to do. And so one time, the pipes are backing up with water, like he can't clean stuff right. So he goes to like use the CO2 valve or something to like flush out the pipes so that they're clear again. But something goes awry, and it turns out he flushed the water and kitchen waste out into a pipe that led on stage, and not only hit guests who were getting their food from the buffet, but hit Dick Nunes, who is the Disneyland president. And you just hear, I saw it in his writing, the way he wrote it, that one of the waitress girls up front just like comes back and just goes, "Run. You have no idea what you've done." And like you just feel the suspense and the comedy all at the same time. And I love that following that, when he concludes the story of how he's then moved into Imagineering, that he loved that he finally was able to tell who that was, like safely, knowing he wasn't going to get fired now. And I love Marty's note that also just pokes fun at like, I can't believe that was you.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. And it shows that, Kevin had his close calls even from the earliest days, and he was able, in retrospect, he's able to poke fun at himself in the scenarios. And
I liked, because this wasn't the only story where he used brackets a lot to like have those little side notes where he's like, haha, that was me, you can't fire me now. Awesome. And I just love, he did that more than once, and you're right, he had quite a few close calls, and I just loved those moments where you could just see him like cheering for himself, like, I did it and no one ever knew until now.
Kind of adds to his relatability as well, right? Because he's, as illustrated earlier, such a humble person, but you can connect with him because of how he infuses that into his writing. So Kevin, through his, I guess, humor and wit and heart, he relays a lot of lessons and takeaways. So what's a lesson or takeaway that you maybe gleaned from Kevin via reading his book?
So something I took from Kevin, at least that resonated with me, being a cast member who has left the company now 5 years ago. I really liked his chapters also where he included his work outside of Imagineering, working in ads. And something I took from him was that any experience can be good experience. I think there's so many of us who want to be cast members, or we have our dream roles. Mine is to work for the Disney Archives. I hope you're listening. But you're not just going to get that in your first job. Your dream job is not going to be your first job. And I really appreciated that while we all might be working towards whatever that dream job is, any job that you're doing before that can be building experience. And all of those experiences are good, because he talked about throughout the book that he accredits all those odd jobs he had, dishwashing, writing ads, working on commercials, that all of that helped him be a good Imagineer because he had so many tools and skills to draw on. So as someone who would love to get back to working for the Walt Disney Company, who is sad because of personal reasons that I couldn't continue after my college program, while I'm waiting to get back, I'm happy to know, like, everything I'm doing now can be a good building block to what I want to get to soon. And I can still get to my dream job. I just have to be patient and learn these lessons from what I'm currently working on.
Yeah, I agree. I really took from that how resilient he was. He was able to transition from being a dishwasher to coming into Imagineering, and then very shortly thereafter had to be let go from Imagineering, but found his way back. And, some people might see that like, oh, I got let go, I can't ever come back. It's a burnt bridge, but he didn't let it be that. And he was able to return to the company. And I think, for cast members, or even those not, like anyone right now in the time that we're living through, a lot of people have been let go from their jobs, whether it's a temporary furlough or unfortunately like the whole thing. It's just a good lesson to have that, you can come back, you can rise above that situation and continue to go after that dream. So that definitely hits home, I think, especially in these times.
I share both of your sentiments as well. I would have said the same thing. I can all kind of take this in a slightly different direction, but I think it's still really at the heart of his book, which all of us share, is that he is such a genuine person. And I think what he conveys through his writing, and whether it be, as noted, as far as like putting the little brackets in by saying like, haha, and being humorous, is that you really have to just embrace being who you are and your all the qualities that make you in your work. And hopefully others will appreciate that as well. I think certainly Kevin has risen over time in the company from being a dishwasher to this major force in Imagineering because of being extremely resilient, as you noted, Courtney, and as you said, Emily, about just embracing any experience, and through that he's built this legacy of wonderful attractions and relationships and collaborations. And I think he is so well liked, and he has had now the opportunity to publish his life story through Disney Editions because of just being a very likable, real individual. And we don't always get that in society. And it's nice to see, the good guys win and just good people being able to accomplish wonderful things. And I think that's illustrated when there was that note about the kid who walked through Carsland and was asking, is this where it was filmed? And I know that story has been relayed in different contexts over the years, but it's a testament to how he and his comrades at Imagineering were able to develop an immersive world. And had it not been for their hard and investment in their work, it would not have been able to be demonstrated in such a fantastic final product.
And Brett, I think your lesson also does coordinate really well with things Courtney and I said, that I don't think he would have made such good use of his experiences in his various jobs, or that resilience to come back to the company and then rise through it, if he wasn't authentically true to himself throughout all of those processes. Just because when you're completely authentically yourself, those relationships that he did build that helped him move up the ladder and to his dream job were made possible because that's what it all is. It's all about relationships. And that's really well communicated throughout his book. How warmly he talks about every person, how he has a personal story for every person he's worked with. But because of that, that's what's helped him be so successful as well.
Ditto.
So to kind of wrap us up, We have had so many author interviews, Courtney, on Book of the Mouse in these first 3 months of this season. And this is our first podcast episode in a while where we don't have the author with us. So I kind of want to ask, guys, if Kevin Rafferty were with us, what are some things you would want to ask him? Brett, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I have no shortage of questions that I would want to ask his way. But I think one point that wasn't given too much detail in the book, and I suspect there are some reasons perhaps why not, he referenced that he was one of the original individuals who developed the concept for Disney California Adventure. And ultimately, a lot of his attractions would be based in that park. But it was not his original intent or interest to have been a key Imagineering figure in creating those attractions. So I'd like to know why Kevin may not have wanted that. Why was he not as invested or closely connected to the park in its earliest iteration? It seemed like there was a degree of not necessarily loving what the park represented. And I know the Imagineering story doc goes into that a little bit, but I'd love to know his personal views of that era of Disney Imagineering.
Yeah, I feel like we got little hints of that from other Imagineers on the Imagineering story. Like, they were very frank about their opinions. Maybe not from Kevin in that documentary, but I'd really love to explore that more as well. So I think that's a great question. Mine is a point of curiosity because he has worked on stuff all around the world. He did Pan Galactic Pizza Port over at Tokyo Disney. His work spans continents, but he also started in the parks. And I started my Disney journey at Space Mountain. So to me, I always feel very at home in Tomorrowland. But this is someone who's worked at the Plaza, at Club 33, again, all around the world. So my question would be, you've designed these attractions all over the world. In what area of the Disney parks do you feel most at home, whether it's a land, attraction, or restaurant? I'm just curious, what of his work, or even just his experiences, resonates with him the most when he's visiting those parks?
That's a really good one, because I think you're right. And even as people maybe who don't work in the parks, for our listeners, I think we all have a spot in the parks, whichever park you visit, where you feel most connected. So that would be really interesting for someone who's not only seen every park, but worked in every park as well. For me, a question I would have for him is kind of part of the Imagineering cycle where he's had the opportunity to redesign attractions. I would like to know his feelings that eventually his attractions, and some of them are in the cycle of they will be recreated or reshaped in some way. So I would like to know what he thinks about seeing maybe some of his attractions change over time.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll get to ask him on our show or Brett's show, or maybe he'll be in another documentary. That would be fun. But in the meantime, I think this was a lot of fun with you guys. I'm glad we could get back to just a good old-fashioned discussion. So thank you both. We like to leave people with resources. I feel like, Brett, you had a great one. Do you want to repeat what you had shared for that panel, just in case anyone didn't get a chance to write it down?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to want to go on YouTube. Just type in keywords D23 Expo 2013 Leave M Laughing. It was a panel that kind of celebrated 60 years of Disney Imagineering. And yeah, Kevin was one of the panelists. He talks about some of the stories illustrated in the book, like the It's Tough to Be a Bug situation. Also, we didn't have a chance to talk about it today, but some of the Toontown stuff that he developed in terms of Mickey's Toontown and the lyrics for the radio station WACKY, that's kind of featured in there. So it's a great panel. It's super funny. It's just like the book. Mind you, he's accompanied by his Imagineering friends, so you get their perspectives too. And there's also some good little interviews on YouTube. I will also mention that there was a panel about Kevin's book at the last D23 Expo, and I was in attendance there, and it was fantastic. It's on YouTube, so just type in like D23 Expo 2019 Kevin Rafferty, and it's a really nice encapsulation of the book for folks who haven't read it, and some of the fun stories are relayed in that context with his editor, Wendy Lefcon. So it's a really fun interview to watch.
YouTube is such a treasure trove for Disney fixes. I'll reiterate the one that I shared. I think it kind of connects because we talked about Kevin kind of hamming it up with his dad jokes and another ham. I feel like in this one particularly is John Lithgow. He's kind of leans into the Disney fun, and that's the Walt Disney World Past, Present, and Future. It's on YouTube under a channel called Disney Park Videos. Fun just for nostalgia elements, but as I said, you do get a little sneak peek at the future that never was with Dick Tracy's Crime Stoppers and the Roger Rabbit attraction. So be sure to check those out. In our next episode, tune back later in May, and Emily and I will be reiterating our Fairy Tale Favorites series. We plan to celebrate the 70th anniversary of Cinderella.
That'll be really fun, Courtney. We haven't done a fairy tale favorite in a while, and I think, given the times we're in, it's fun to go back to those fairy tales that make us feel good.
Absolutely. In the meantime, you can keep up with us on social media. We are at Book of the Mouse on Twitter and Instagram, or you can always email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Be sure to leave us a review on iTunes so others can find our podcast and read and listen along with us. If you want to keep up with me personally, Courtney, I'm on Instagram at GreatGutsby or Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at Emily_McD. And Brett, let our listeners know where they can keep up with you and notably Disney.
Yeah, be sure to subscribe to Notably Disney wherever you listen to podcasts. So that's Notably, Notably Disney. So lots of fun content there. And if you're interested in getting updates about new and upcoming episodes, follow me on Twitter. It's at BNACHMAN Reports. So B. Nachman Reports. And yeah.
Perfect. We will be sure to include links to those in our show notes. Since you are our guest of honor, you get to do the honors of closing us out with a quote. Let's hear what you picked for us.
This was like the hardest thing to figure out. I wanted to incorporate something from Kevin's book, and there were, as we all attest to, there was no shortage of great content in there in terms of clever writing. So how he kind of concludes the book is with the following quote, which is an homage to The Haunted Mansion, but with a Kevin spin. So he writes, quote, "I'm going to stop now before my cantankerous perspicacity prompts an aura of snore-boding."
That was such a good dad joke, for sure. Well, there's no snore-boding on this episode, and we are so grateful that you joined us for it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Courtney and Emily, for having me. I really had a lot of fun talking about one of my favorite books from 2019 with you. This was a great ride.
And I know that we're all going to get together again sometime on the podcast universe.
Absolutely.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, listeners.
The Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.